The statement heard around New England. You know, if you follow another team, you don't get what the big deal is. But those of us who follow the Patriots closely for years know this just doesn't happen. Patriots releasing this statement on Jerod Mayo and the offensive coordinator search. The New England Patriots and head coach Bill Belichick have begun contract extension discussions with Jerod Mayo that would keep him with the team long term. In addition, the team will begin interviewing for offensive coordinator candidates next week. Now, again, this is odd for the Patriots because they just don't do this sort of thing. And they were onto something because Jerod Mayo has turned down interview requests with other teams. Okay, the Browns wanted him for his defensive coordinator opening, which, okay, makes sense if the Pats are giving him more power. I guess he doesn't need to interview to become a defensive coordinator, but he's also turned down the Carolina Panthers to interview for their head coaching position, which is truly unusual. We'll open up here with Breer and Ted Johnson. Bert, what do you make of this whole situation?
I think he should have taken the Panthers interview regardless. Like, I think unless they're going to make him the head coach right now, I think it would have behooved him to take that interview. I understand if they're putting something attractive in front of you and telling you do not go interview for the Browns defensive coordinator job, totally get that. I think it's bad for Jerod Mayo.
Why
not take that interview?
How come he's not doing it?
It's an opportunity.
I understand why he should take it. How come he's not?
I assume they told him not to. Like, that's the only reason. If you're Jerod Mayo and you want to be a head coach, the only reason you would not to is because either Bill Belichick or Robert Kraft told you it's a condition of the new deal they're doing for him.
What do you think, Ted?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of, Mike, is the only thing that would make it worthwhile for Jerod is show me the money and also show me some titles. I mean, nothing short of an assistant head coaching title, defensive coordinator title. I think that's what you have to at least come away with. If you're going to turn down head coaching interviews, you guys, you better be giving me a title that is commensurate with maybe not a head coaching job, but assistant head coach or defensive coordinator, which we all know he covets.
My understanding is, too, this is not about title. It was about growth. So I think it has to be an actual material difference in his role that was going to get him to sign off on something.
Okay, I would agree. And if he does walk away with this as the defensive coordinator, title or responsibilities, I think that's a pretty important thing because that will have meant that Bill Belichick is reorganizing his staff and in some way, shape, or form sort of his son, either demoting his son or reassigning his son or, putting Mayo ahead of his son, which I think is, I think that's an important thing that he has to show his locker room, given how badly, the staff has deteriorated the last couple of years because of stuff like this, because of nepotism and cronyism and that sort of thing.
And because we've been told for decades now that they're cutthroat and they'll only do what's in the best interest of the team, and that's the way they negotiate contracts, that's the way they trade guys out of town. So that'd be putting your money where your mouth is. If you're willing to throw your kid under the bus to keep a quality assistant coach in place, like, the optics of that would be pretty good in the locker room.
I can't imagine that ever happening. I can't imagine Bill Belichick ever promoting Jerod Mayo over his son. And I know Bert, you mentioned that he's not looking for titles, he's looking for more responsibility. But to the outside NFL world, titles mean something. And so just because you have added responsibility, it sounds like he's got a lot of responsibility right now, but isn't getting any credit for it, right? That's what you kind of keep hearing behind the scenes, that Steven is the one that gets all the credit, and it's really Jerod doing a lot of the legwork behind the scenes. So to me, a title, even though he might not want a title, he should want a title because I think that's what people look for.
Don't we think that as part of, what's keeping him here is a promise that you get a real look as the next head coach?
I think
and do we think if we had to put odds up on a big board, Ted, I'll start with you, that he's the odds-on favorite to be the next Patriots head coach?
I don't know how he couldn't be. I mean, just as far as I know, the relationship he has with the Crafts and everything, and I don't know Jerod as well as a lot of you guys do, but everything I've ever heard about Jerod Mayo is glowing. And so, for him to not be considered as potential next head coach, that, to me, has to be on the table. And I don't know how you negotiate that. I don't know how you put that in writing. But if I'm Jerod Mayo, I look at what happened with Josh McDaniels several years before that, and that would be a cautionary tale for me. I would want something in writing, not just a promise, a verbal promise, but something in writing that assures me I could be the next head coach after Bill retires.
I think this is a little different than the Josh McDaniels situation because Josh McDaniels went through the interview process with the Colts and found a problem with it. Didn't like the mix there, didn't like the way that the responsibility was split up. There was an issue there. And so that was after he went through the process. So he knew what the landscape was. like Jerod Mayo didn't even investigate the landscape on the Carolina job. So like to me, like that would mean the Patriots would have to go to another level to keep him. And if you're Jerod Mayo and you know there are only 32 of these, I think the discussion would at least have to be broached that you're eventually going to be considered to replace Bill Belichick.
Okay, now on the offensive coordinator search. We have a lot of names out there. Greg Bedard put together a list. Bill O'Brien, obviously the former Patriots offensive coordinator. Houston head coach, Alabama there currently. Chad O'Shea was another former Patriots assistant. Nick Caley's currently the tight end coach, thought to be joining Josh McDaniels out in Vegas with Bo Hardigree and Shaplinski. Now maybe those guys might be coming back, and then he fills it out there at the bottom with some other names. Ted, what do you want to see from the new offensive coordinator?
Well, first off, I'd like to know what kind of system he's running. Are we running the Shanahan system? What are we doing? The Brady system? What is it? Because that will decide whether or not, what coach I want to maybe go after, right? And so Bill O'Brien does not run the Shanahan system, right? So if you want Bill O'Brien, that would be my first choice, is a Bill O'Brien kind of, I look at maybe, what the Giants are doing with Brian Daboll, and I go, I don't know. I could see that's kind of what Bill O'Brien does. I mean, what Daniel Jones is doing there, to me, it's Bill O'Brien. To me, it's a no-brainer. This guy has got street cred. I've seen what he did with Deshaun Watson in his first his rookie season there in 2017. He can coach quarterbacks. He can coach offense. That would be my first choice.
I just think you have to be all in on whatever you're doing. Like, it just felt like they were 1 foot into the Patriots system last year, 1 foot into the Shanahan thing. Let's see what works. And like, get to September and October, they still didn't really know who they were offensively. So I think you're looking for somebody who's going to come in with an idea of exactly what he wants to be. And I think before you pick that guy, you have to decide what you want to be. Do you want to go back, like Ted said, and be the old Patriot system? Or do you still look at it the way you did a year ago? When you pared down the system, the reason why was because the point of entry was too high for the other 10 guys in the huddle. Forget the quarterback. And they were casting too narrow a net in the draft and free agency when it came to skill players. If you're still thinking that way, then go hire somebody who's going to build a system like that. If you're thinking we want to go back to what we were doing for 20 years under Tom Brady, then do that. But don't try to do both.
I just want a strong figure who is independent, has autonomy, and isn't under Bill's thumb. Vice president in charge of offense, almost to the point where he reports to the Crafts. He doesn't report to Bill. You know what I mean?
All those names that we listed right there, there's only one guy at the top.
O'Brien is the only one.
The only one that would have those qualifications, Mike.
Exactly, but that's what they need. In other words, I've lost faith in Bill to figure out the offensive thing. Maybe if this were 20 years ago, he's 71 years old. He's so close to the finish line. He's not an offensive coach to begin with, but he's such a good football coach that if he really devoted himself to it, he'd figure it out eventually, but not at this stage. So, you know what, Bill, when it comes to offense, you're out. You're out. I mean, that's what I'm saying if I'm the Crafts. This is going to be Bill O'Brien's offense, or it's going to be, name the offensive. It's going to be a named position. He's going to be paid well. It's going to be his department. Maybe we'll even let him hire a few assistant coach. It's got to be that kind of thing. And if Bill doesn't like it, tough.
You know what Nick Saban did? Like his best friend, what Nick Saban did was 7 years ago he decided, you know what, the offensive game's sort of passing me by. And he went and hired big name after big name out of big colleges, the NFL.
Right.
It was Lane Kiffin. It was Brian Daboll. It was Mike Locksley. It was Bill O'Brien. It was Steve Sarkisian. Like, you wonder if Bill needs to say, okay, like, this is sort of passed me by.
Do you think Bill's ego would allow him to say that, Ted?
I would think not.
Right. He has to be told to do this by the owner. That's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. It might be trending that way, Mike.
But that shows growth by Nick Saban.
Right.
I'm not going to pretend to know what I don't know, and I'll turn over a part of my football team to someone who knows better. It sounds so functional. And it feels like here, Bill's going to have his arm twisted.
And I think he kind of did that for a while with Josh McDaniels. I mean, in a sense, I think Josh McDaniels was handed the offense. At least in the last few years, it felt that way, Mike. So it's not like he's opposed to doing it, but it's got to be his guy that he's had history with that meets all those qualifications. That list is going to be very short. There's not a lot of those guys out there.
Okay, if you want Cliff Kingsbury, he's pretty much taking himself out of the running. He's taking himself out of the country. Yeah, he's gonna drop a bunch of ayahuasca or whatever and go to Thailand, and he's out. So he's not coaching anywhere. Meanwhile, Bedard also wrote the following on Boston Sports Journal. He said, "There's no question that the press release sent out by the Patriots on Thursday night was a fall out of your chair stunning kind of thing. It was a signal that Bill Belichick, after 2 losing seasons in the past 3 years and a 25-26 record since pushing Brady out the door, was no longer going to go unchecked." But That's just a superficial public relations side of this. At the end of the day, and after this search for an offensive coordinator, is anything going to fundamentally change at one Patriot place, Ted? I think, you really, I thought, articulated it well during the week on Boston Sports Tonight, that it would have been easy for Bill to go into that meeting with Robert and just give him lip service. But then you saw the owner the very next day with that release. We're interviewing for offensive coordinator starting next week, and Mayo is going to be our guy. So what do you think? Is this window dressing or for real?
Boy, I can't imagine. I know it sounds like typically I would say, yeah, it's all window dressing, but I don't know. I mean, the statement was so out of left field, and I just thought it was just unprecedented for I think for Kraft to put Bill on notice and a clock. He started a clock, and he said he wants an offensive coordinator. That is to say that you're going to be looking for offensive coordinators, not for offensive-minded coaches. It's offensive coordinator. To me, I think things have changed. I can't imagine what Greg's saying. Typically, I would normally believe that, but I feel like we're at a point now, from what I've seen this week, that those things are over, and it's Kraft's taken over.
Did it not feel like I'm not even going to call it subtle, right? Just I'm going to show you who's boss moment. That's what it felt like. And it was interesting watching the national reaction, which a lot of people kind of glossed it over, oh yeah, so what? And the people who are here, who've seen it and lived it for the last 2.5 decades, were like, my God. This guy is talking about an active negotiation. He's talking about someone's title. He's going to run a real search for an outside candidate. It just feels to me like this is Robert Kraft uncomfortable with the way the fan base is looking at him, with the way that maybe he was being talked about from 2 to 6 weekdays.
Right, time from 12 to 12. I mean, everyone's sort of, I think the pressure's been amped up
and I think that's a huge part of it. I do think he saw the conversation over the last couple of weeks. And look, I don't think it's just not winning. They've been in positions where they haven't won at the highest clip before. I think it's the way it looks. I think it's that it doesn't look functional, and that was a huge issue for them.
I don't think it's the way it's looked the last few years. I think being slow playing with Cam Newton, slow playing an offensive coordinator last year, slow playing after Tom Brady left is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Not getting a quarterback. That I think the Crafts are no, I'm not going to fall for this again. They're smartening up, and I think they're right to do so.
Yeah, and in that statement, they basically said, we're going to hire someone to take over the quarterback, and we are also signing your replacement. So, Bill, game on. I think he has one more year.
Yeah.